And now we're live. Sonny, thank you so much for joining me on Hard Money Monday. If we go back in time a couple of years, you were one of the first people that honestly ever gave me a chance to ask questions about real estate specific to Tampa. So it's always cool to see things come full circle, and I'm so glad to have you on.
Likewise, I always have fun with you. So, and you're always doing great things. So anytime I have a chance to be a part of it, I'm going to raise my hand.
Well, I appreciate you saying so. And also, I think you might have been the first person to tell me about FEMA 50/50 in Florida back before it was like the thing that everybody talks about. So, how did you first learn about it? Was it like you heard someone get burned on a deal, or what was your background on first hearing about FEMA 50/50?
Yes, through a third, an acquaintance brought it up to me. There was a house across the street from one of my rentals now that an investor purchased, and it was in a flood zone. And the investor had these big plans to renovate it, and they ran into the FEMA 50% rule. So they pulled out of the project. The house sat for, goodness, 3 or 4 years. And coincidentally, the builder who built my house in South Tampa, the one I'm talking about, just purchased the lot. So he is going to do a tear down and rebuild completely. But to me, it was negligent on the real estate agent's side who sold the
Right.
house to that investor, because they didn't guide him or counsel him on, hey, you can't do that. And a lot of agents, a lot of people in our industry aren't aware of the FEMA 50% rule. And it is going, in my opinion, it's going to be difficult for homeowners that were recently flooded by Helene, that have been in their homes for 30 years.
Yep.
It's sad.
Yep.
I did a lot of digging and to prepare for today, and it's alarming. I don't know how people are going to navigate through it.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is like you mentioned negligence on behalf of the agent. So I was talking to an agent friend in Sarasota, and they lost out on a listing, little old lady house floods on a canal, right? And the agent that ended up winning the business was like, no, 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 we're going to sell it. The lady wanted to sell it as, essentially a fix and flip, right? You're going to get,
Mhm.
and they're like, hey, look, there's no way this gets by FEMA 50/50. We have to sell at land value. Well, agent B comes along and says, well, hey, here's the thing. If your buyer doesn't know about FEMA 50/50, it's fine and you can get that price. And I'm just like,
Ah, that
come
makes me
on.
itch, physically itch. Um, and doing on that note too, like if they did get away with selling it, and they abided by the 50/50 or the FEMA 50% rule, but they didn't replace the roof. This is hypothetical. A
Mm,
year later, if a roof is required by the insurance, if they've maxed out on that 50% rule, they can't put a roof on. Their permit is not going to be approved.
whoa. So,
Yes.
okay. So if I'm following correctly, just say, and actually, let's take one step back here.
Okay.
So I'm not an expert on this topic. Um, and I know you've researched it more than I have, but my understanding in recent conversations is that what the FEMA 50/50 rule essentially states is that totally ignore the value of the land,
Mhm.
just the value of the building itself, which is what either going to be from an appraisal or assessed value, correct?
Yes. Depreciated value of the
Depre-
structure.
Depreciated value. So if you're taking depreciation on your real estate or like accelerated depreciation, it could bite you in this
Yeah.
situation.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're going to take the remaining value of just the building itself, cut that in half, and that's the renovation amount that your contractor can state when they're going to put in for permits. And basically, if you put in for more than that on your permits, you get denied, or if you just do the work unpermitted and they catch you, you're just red taped, right? Red flagged.
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of digging on that too, because I know homeowners, and I mean, we're human. We'd be like, well, why don't we just not permit it?
Yeah,
If they
right.
cities and municipalities have put in, systems in place to catch that. But if you do the work and you're caught, I mean, there's several things that could happen to you, and I'll just name two. And I'm is one is they won't get flood insurance. FEMA will not grant them flood insurance on that structure, which is
Right.
going to, if you have a mortgage on the property, what do you do there? Or two, you have to go back in and do the permits, maybe even rip some of that work out, and then do like a post permit on that property.
Yeah,
But either which way, it's a bad day for the homeowner if they're caught. And
for
like I
sure.
said, they are putting a lot of systems, and we have AI, we have drones, we have a lot of information at our fingertips where the cities are using to, catch you know, these homeowners that are trying to slide by the 50-50 rule.
Yeah, I think it was actually at a meetup that you held, where it was like one of the guys with the Hillsborough County appraisal was like, "Hey, yeah, look at these satellite pictures that we look at all the time."
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's gonna be pretty tough to sneak something past them. And to your point, if they're, there are things that AI sucks at, but one of the things AI is really good at is like handling a ton of data and being able to recognize patterns from it. It's like, wow, that
Mm-hmm.
sounds a lot like taking satellite pictures and saying, hey, what changed? And by the way, was there a permit pull that that corresponds with the change over time? And to circle back on the example that we were talking about earlier. So property floods, um, it's in a flood zone, right? And let's just say that the value of the building after depreciation is like 140,000, which honestly, like that's probably like the case for a lot of houses, somewhere around that price point. And 70 grand doesn't really get you that far on a reno. And you can do 70 grand and the roof is like 12 years old. You're like, yeah, this will pass an inspection for sure. Put 70 grand into the house. On the back end, you've got it listed and 4-point fails because of the roof. So what happens? Like they're not going to get the permit approved. So at that point, 70 grand later, it's just a tear down, or like what
Yeah, that goes back to what is the city going to do if a homeowner is caught, not doing permits, but they won't be able to get the roof, they won't be able to get insurance, so they won't be able to do the sale of a home unless it's a cash deal. So I think in that instance, I mean, you would probably know more than I would on this, on, what you would do if you were a flipper, you did this, and then you try to sell the home and you couldn't close on it without a roof, then that limits your buyer pool to cash buyers and disclosing the issue that you have with the property.
Yeah. I think my solution at that point would be the fetal position, and I'd probably cry for a little while. I mean,
Yeah, rocking back and forth on your desk there. Yeah.
where's the BK button? I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. Yeah. We did actually have a question from my friend Ethan Marsh in the chat asking about thoughts on the 30K credit to elevate, which I'm actually not familiar with at all. Are you familiar with that credit?
That's the first. What county is that in, or is that Florida wide?
I don't know.
Is it county specific? Because also in the 50-50, it's very county, city specific, municipality. Like going back to, we can jump all over the place, but to answer that question, I'm not aware of it.
Got it.
My question back to him is how much, I think raising a structure is going to be significantly more than 30K. Would that even put a dent in things?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's there will be a dent. The question is how big is the dent,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't even imagine like for instance, I think about how expensive it is to put gravel on a driveway. And then it's like, hey, why don't you elevate this entire thing above the flood zone? So this needs to be 4 feet higher across the entire lot. I'm just
Yeah.
like,
How do you do that? I don't understand, because if you go over the FEMA, the 50-50, you either have to elevate it or take measures to waterproof it. Now, the measures to waterproof are only on commercial buildings. they're not on residential. So the only option you have is to elevate the home or tear it down if you run into that FEMA 50/50 rule.
And on like the whole elevation thing. Oh, okay. So Ethan Marsh is talking about Pinellas, Barrier Islands for general location on 30K credit. So this sounds like it might be a Pinellas thing.
Pinellas they're not doing 50/50. Pinellas is doing 49%.
Oh, really? So,
Yes.
okay. So I wanted to ask about this anyways. You said it's county by county, state by state, city by city. So like, if I'm understanding this correctly, there's the national guidelines. And then if counties or cities or whatever want to say like, we're going to take that as the base, but add a little bit on top, make it a little bit more stringent. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah. And going back to the counties I want to address the look back rule when I'm answer this question. The look back rule is when you acquired a property as a flipper, it's in a flood zone, and the property is worth 100 grand and you put in 45 grand. That means you're 5 grand. So when does that reset? When can you put in more money once you reach that threshold of 50/50? And the look back rule can be from 1 year to 5 years to know, like I think Safety Harbor there's no look back
That's
on there.
crazy.
I mean, yeah. And it's not dependent on the owner. It's on the property. So it doesn't reset with change of ownership. It resets whenever their look back rule, whatever time frame they have made for that area. Now, going back to your questions about, the counties adding extra layers, there are some counties in Florida where in my opinion, they're being more friendly to the homeowners, meaning, and again, this is all, it's very difficult to get precise information and guidance unless you know exactly where the property's at, right?
Yeah, right.
Some counties are doing it where it's just like Helene, and then after that, it resets. So
Wow.
I do think that, again, it's really, and you're being like, you can have a friendly county, but you still have to abide by, the FEMA 50% rule. So you're kind of walking a very tight rope on taking care of your constituents and not getting dropped by FEMA for flood insurance, which is a risk. Countywide, you could get, like, if a county is not compliant to these rules, then FEMA can decide, okay, we're not insuring that area.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what my brain automatically goes to? Like, for instance, I haven't heard anything from the lender that I'm with about, hey, here's like our policy on flooded properties. And I'm just like, man, HQ in Seattle, and we have, how many lenders that operate in Florida, specific hard money, right? Because conventional, you kind of got protection because you need the FEMA flood insurance, right? But specifically lenders that are going to be touching properties that need to get fixed up. Like, how many of them are just negligent on FEMA 50/50 and are going to lend on projects for people who think it's not a big deal to renovate the property and get smacked? Like, what do you do? Like, there's not really that many times as a lender, if you're doing deals correctly, that you actually lose. But man, if you lend on a property and they get smacked with FEMA 50/50, like, there's no way the borrower is paying you off. And you have to turn around and sell it at land value, which is probably going to be like significantly less than your loan amount. Just sounds terrible. And who wants to buy that right now? Like, there's just so many lots.
Yeah, there are. I in preparation for this, I really dug into, okay, have there been an increase in houses on the market in the specific areas, the Ballast Point area? And I didn't really see a rise in actual numbers, but that could be because some of those properties were pulled off the market once they were flooded, maybe to take a beat, and then some new. So the numbers have remained flat from what I saw. But in terms of inventory, was it you and I discussing, like, what is the inventory going to look like 6 to 8 months from now?
Yeah,
Once
exactly.
these flippers, people coming into the community, and try to build or make an affordable home for a future homeowner. So what is that going to look like 6 to 8 months from now when these properties hit the market? And those properties that are on the market, you as an agent or as a buyer or as a lender, you have to do your due diligence to say, okay, where are they at on their FEMA 50/50?
Yeah.
And because part of that cost, the big cost is roofing, HVAC, ductwork. Like that in and of itself, that's going to take a big chunk of change out of your budget.
Yeah. I mean, mechanicals alone is going to be 30 grand, right? Like
Yeah.
that's, I mean, theoretically, if most properties are going to be between that 100 to 200K building value post depreciation, it's like, it really better just be a couple of inches. Like,
Yeah.
full reno is going to be tough. And what's really I don't know if this is actually good or bad. I'll ask your opinion on it. I kind of have my own stance. But if there's a property that needed any kind of work and was in a flood zone beforehand, it's a new build. There's not even a question. Anything that was distressed before the flood, new build. Like there's no options. It's a new build. And that actually kind of brings me into my next point here. And I will say anecdotally, as far as inventory, I've seen so much stuff off market since the storms, like crazy increase, number of calls, number of inquiries, number of deals that I see other wholesalers put out, like on my weekly deal drop. It's been like max off market inventory.
Yeah.
But specifically, like if I'm not really sure why the government created this rule, like why does this exist? This sucks. People are losing a bunch of equity, and grandma now can't sell her house for the value she could before. People are getting displaced. Why do you think that this rule, this FEMA 50/50 rule, is in place?
I want to look at it like it more of an optimistic. I want to go at this more optimistic than, I don't want to go in the deep, dark conspiracy theory behind government regulations. But I honestly, I think it's because, especially in Florida, we have learned from past storms how to build or how to build a home that's going to withstand these big storms.
Yep.
And I do think it's time, if you've got a 1950s ranch that is built to code, back in 1950, we've evolved since then. So we need to bring those up to standard. So I think there's some goodness in it. I really do. It's difficult to see. But I really do think at the end of the day, I would like to think it's for the better, for the community, to build a better structure. But I'm curious to hear what yours is.
I have the same opinion. So usually when the federal government is involved, there is a tendency for short-term benefits with long-term costs, concentrated benefits, dispersed costs. Like it's always decisions that don't make sense in the long run. When I look at FEMA 50/50, I'm like, man, this is just like being disciplined. Like, yeah, honestly, it really sucks. And some people, there are concentrated costs, but overall, just like for the greater good, there's benefits and it makes so much sense. I mean, how foolish would it be? In my opinion, people in Florida are pretty oblivious, I think, to like flood risk, hurricane risk. Like, I mean, 2 years ago, prior to 2022, if you ask people in Tampa Bay, like, will we ever get hit by a hurricane?
No.
I would say 80% of locals would be like, nah, it doesn't happen here. And climate change isn't real, and like water temperatures aren't rising. It's like, well, newsflash. Last year, the ocean was the actual temperature of a hot tub. And that's just going to keep happening and keep getting hotter. And so how foolish would it be to say like, you flooded this year. I bet we never get a storm in the next 50 years. Like just, fix it up, just put some more money into it. I think that like hurricanes, all of these things are going to happen with greater severity, greater frequency, which is what the data suggests. And I think it would be incredibly short-sighted to say, yeah, guys, just put 100K into these properties. Like it would be a tremendous waste. So the more I thought about it, the more I kind of deduced that this 50% rule, honestly, it makes a lot of sense for the long term. And I think that it's going to make Florida like more viable, say 20 years from now, as an actual place to like maintain value. I will say on your point about, this discussion with inventory, and I'm curious if you agree or disagree on this. So when I think about doing a deal, when you're doing it for the short term, right? I'm going to build, or I'm going to fix, and I'm going to flip. I'm not going to hold. I think one of the most important things is inventory in your specific area. How much competition will I have when I need somebody to make the biggest buying decision of their life? How many other houses do they have to choose from between mine and others in the area that they want to live? Well, I think that right now, this is one of the greatest opportunities to pick up big discounts on properties not in flood zones and flip them, because guess what? Every other house didn't flood. So you're not going to get inundated with new builds and fix and flips in the spring. On the contrary, let's just take we had questions about the barrier islands, right? In Pinellas. Well, all right. So you're going to build and you're going to try and sell. Isn't everybody on the street also going to do that?
Yeah.
That just that doesn't seem smart to me at all. I mean, I think there's amazing opportunity if you're willing to build and rent for do a BTR, but have a 2 to 3 year delayed exit. I think it is honestly one of the smartest business plans right now. If you're willing to do that, but most people just, they don't have it in them to do that, et cetera. But to combine a super low cost basis with waiting till the inventory is down, because Madeira Beach inventory in 3 years is not going to be great. In the next 1 to 2 years, there's going to be tons of inventory. That's my personal opinion. I'm curious if where you overlap and disagree with that.
No, I agree. But I'm always an advocate. I've never flipped a property. That's just not my area. I'm more of a hold, maybe because I'm old. I don't know, but I like to hold. So I always, and whenever I'm working with my investors, or even people buying just regular homes and knowing that they're going to move them, I'm coaching them, buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold. But you're thinking, a couple of years down the road, and I agree. And more to the point, this is all anecdotal, but right after the storm, a lot of my buyers are like, no flood zone. I don't want a flood zone. Totally gun shy. Now they're like, well, okay, did it flood? Yeah, did it flood before? And so people have a short-term memory of what happened. And 3 years from now, if you buy a property and you fix it up and it's in a flood zone, I don't think people are going to be scarred like they were immediately after the storm. But to your point and to your question, yes, I'm a firm believer in buying and holding, and also, timing what the inventory is going to look like. When is it time to sell? And I think a lot of it just depends on your business plan. Are you a flipper where you get that fast injection of money, or do you have a trickle down where it takes a little bit while for you to get your money back?
I think generally it kind of circles back to the point. Don't have one exit plan.
Yes,
buy with the ability to hold, and then if it makes sense to sell.
Yeah.
Everything's always for sale at the right price.
Yeah, I like to work in worst case scenario. What's worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. If I'm okay with that, then let's go. But if it's not, then I'm not taking that risk.
100%. So we did have a question about actually Edgar, I'm buying a deal from Edgar right now. So if you're listening in and you're a fix and flipper, or he's actually a buyer himself too. So good guy to connect with. But the question here, Sonny, is what are your thoughts on getting a third-party appraiser to increase the home value, the value of the building itself, so you could increase the 50%, your potential amount that you can spend on renovation?
I 100% think you should do that. And if you link up with an appraiser, so there's two different. If you contact an appraiser and they try to do it on a regular appraisal form, they're not right. You need it. There's a different type of an appraisal that's needed. It's called a FEMA 50% rule. And Michael Scarpa told me about that. He's a great resource here in Tampa. But I would definitely get another appraisal done on it, because if you go to the tax record, historically those are low. So you could probably get more value. Yeah. Some counties have it where I think it was Cape down in Cape Coral where the guidance they gave their homeowners is the appraised value times point or times 1.04, the
Mm,
tax appraisal, just to get it lifted a little bit. That's totally county dependent.
right.
But I would highly recommend getting another appraisal done.
Yep. And one point to add on to that is like wholesalers right now, I know because I see these deals are having a hard time selling these flooded properties. I'm like, hey, I know that you like to spend absolutely zero money on getting a deal across the table except for your marketing costs. But if you're serious about selling this and you actually want your buyers to win, you should get an appraisal. It doesn't have to be through an AMC, which AMC's, sorry if anyone's listening, they suck to work with. It's a requirement for loans, but you can just get a private appraisal. So, for instance, you could go to a guy like Michael Scarpa or Jordan Garcia, be like, hey, I want you to appraise this, or like somebody you know, but there's no like mortgage certificate, whatever. It doesn't have to be lender approved. Just an appraisal from an appraiser that has that FEMA 50/50. And then all of a sudden, you actually know what you're dealing with. Like Joey Long had a deal, great area Seminole. And we were thinking just offhand, like this would be like 130K reno. It should be good to go. Well, post appraisal, we could only put you could only put 70K into the property. Just like, all right, well, this actually is a new build. Now we know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which you just literally you don't know. And people don't like buying risk, right? Like you
Yeah.
always will discount price for risk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else? I was going to ask you something, and then I started going off on a tangent.
Well,
uh,
if you're with me, you're always going to go off on tangents. So
that's
that's
okay.
it's probably my fault.
I remember now. So one of the things I wanted to ask about was we talked earlier about how it's kind of crazy expensive. I don't know the exact amount. If anybody knows what it costs to move dirt, feel free to drop it in the comments. But can't you just throw a property up on stilts and call it good, or does that not work?
I mean, that in my mind is raising the structure, right?
I've heard different things from different people, and I don't know
Yeah.
the answer. And that's why I'm asking. And maybe you don't know for sure the answer either, but I have heard from some people stilts are good. No, no, no. The ground has to be lifted up. And I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I haven't been asked that specifically. I mean, if you apply logic, then stilts would be adequate. But then well, when you apply government, sometimes logic is out the window. So I can certainly find that out, but I don't know the answer to that. And I bet it's going to be county dependent, or city dependent.
Yeah. I
I'm
know
tempted just to ask Chat GPT right now because we can.
ChatGPT knows all. Bet your entire
Yes.
real estate investment strategy on ChatGPT.
Yes.
I know Justin Noe is tuned in, and he's saying it's 400 to 700 for a load, which I would guess is like I don't know, maybe a couple yards of dirt. So take the number of loads times how big your lot is, I guess, and you could kind of deduce what it
So,
costs to raise the land.
but if you go one step further too, landscaping is not part of the cost associated with FEMA 50/50. So bringing in dirt, would that be part of the cost of the FEMA 50/50?
Well, it wouldn't matter because you're doing a new build, right? So
But,
that's like,
oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Justin says go in and create a mountain to get it out of the flood zone. Amen, brother. Florida's gonna weigh like twice the amount it did before in land mass from all the dirt that we import from
Yeah,
Georgia, or I don't know. I don't even know where the dirt comes from.
yeah.
So, what do you think anyone else should know who's, I don't know, let's just say that you're talking to like retail buyer in the Northeast, and
Mhm.
they still like the Florida dream, but they're kind of scared about the hurricanes and they're worried about flooding. What would you tell them if they wanted to be near the water and they were going to be in a flood zone?
I would look at the age of the property. Any properties that have made it through Helene and Milton without any, issues, I think those are good I would feel very comfortable selling those properties.
Right.
If a property, was flooded in Helene, then there's a lot more digging. But if you're coming from, the Northeast and you're looking to be close to the water, the first thing I'm going to try to do is get you out of a flood zone. If you are in a flood zone, then look at the age of the property. Where is it in terms of, current flood standards, and go from there. But it's a balancing act, because people want to, like, you get buyers like, I want to be close to the water, I don't want to be in a flood zone, and I want it under 500 grand. You're like, okay, we can't do all three of those, but yeah, I would look at, my first priority would try to get them out of the flood zone, but that's difficult where we're at.
My favorite line to go to when I kind of just feel like being a little bit of a prick to somebody who has super unrealistic expectations, aka is about to waste my time. I actually got this line a couple weeks ago and the person didn't respond. But I like to tell people, like, yeah, that's awesome. You know what I want to do? I want to eat ice cream all day, every day, and never gain any weight. They're just like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, I can list the stuff that I want that's not realistic too, like,
if we're wishing, I want to get on board, Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to ride a unicorn home from work too,
Yeah, exactly. But it's the market is, I think buyers are they've already stopped that knee-jerk reaction of I don't want to be in a flood zone. But again, I go back to, if it survived these past two storms, that's a solid property.
Yeah. I think really, to summarize the biggest takeaways here, is that, one, the odds of you getting caught not pulling permits, very, very high. Anything flood zone. So unless you absolutely love risk, probably not a great idea. Point number two, to get clarity on exactly what it is, how much room you have for the renovation, you really should get an appraisal. And it doesn't have to be through an AMC. Contact your local appraisal. Make sure you get the FEMA form. And then I think the third biggest point is get to know the rules very specific for the county and the city that you're working with, because to your point, they might have, the look back periods are different. They might have some different things, different like bases as outside of 50-50, et cetera. And let me know if I'm missing anything, but I think really those are the three biggest takeaways that someone needs to pick up from, FEMA 50-50 and how to invest in this market right now.
Absolutely. I would add one more, and this is for my space, more the retail space, because you're in your, I'm not hard money.
Please do.
I'm not that. That's not how my brain works. But also, if you're purchasing properties that have been flipped from this flood, I would look into see, how much did they pull the permits? There's a little bit more due diligence that you need to do as a buyer if you're purchasing one of these flips on the back end. And going back to getting caught, Cincinnati did a program where it basically increased awareness of non-permitted properties, and I suspect Florida may mimic that type. They used demographics, they used aerial photos, and that increased their violation rates from up to, it was 78%.
Wow.
So yeah, I would be, if you're thinking about trying to do it on the down low, don't. I think that's going to end up biting you in the butt.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not always one to listen to rules if I don't like them, transparently. But in this case, I think there's so much to lose that it's really just not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, as a business owner, you're aware of the rules, you follow them, but there's some that you're like, whatever.
Hey, every single thing you do, cost benefit analysis,
Yes, exactly.
Chance to get caught. What's the consequences?
Yep.
Am I going to do it or not?
Risk analysis all the time.
That's right. So with that, I just want to thank you for joining, sharing all of your wisdom. I actually learned a ton. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and all your local expertise here. And for anybody watching, Sunny actually, I've listed a property, flipped a property. She listed it for me, absolutely crushed it. This was spring of last year. So pretty competitive market. And from the time we listed it, we were closed in under 30 days, I think.
It was a quick. You
Yeah.
put together good product, so that makes my job a lot easier. So,
There you go.
yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for having me. I love talking about real estate, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay. Bye, Jared.
Bye.